All right, so now let's discuss input-output configuration of measurement systems. So in the previous lecture, we discussed about the various classifications of the measurement systems or the instruments. And we are also going to study about the performance characteristics of instruments, which actually is very important as far as the instrument design and analysis is concerned. But in between, we will actually look at the different types of inputs actually that go into the instruments and what are the various other sometimes what we call them as interfering or modifying inputs which can actually hamper the output, and how actually we can actually take care of such inputs. Now moving ahead, these are the input quantities. The first is the desired input, so the quantity that the instrument is intended to actually measure. For example, we want to measure the temperature, we want to measure the velocity, we want to measure the pressure. So that's the quantity that the instrument is actually intended to measure. But there could be something called as interfering inputs. It's again a quantity that the instrument unintentionally actually is sensitive to. So, and then similarly we have modifying inputs. These are the three varieties or the three types of inputs actually that go into any instrument. This is called as modifying inputs. This is the quantity that causes change in the input-output relation for the desired and interfering inputs. Now, this has been provided as an input-output configuration in a block diagram fashion. So you can just see here, we have ID that represents the desired input. We have IM referring to the modifying input, and we have capital I referring to interfering input. So now this will be more clear with an example that I will just maybe discuss after this slide. So let's assume ID defines the instrument, the desired input, and FD actually represents the function actually, in terms of, you can say it's a transfer function that actually converts the input to the output, or it's nothing but an input output relation, the way we also describe the transfer function. It could be, let's say for a spring, it could be that the input is force and the output is displacement. So the input and output is actually you know uh, related by a constant k for a linear spring, or it could be any other non-linear function that the output is a function of input. Could be like output is a function of sinusoidal input id. It could be a function of a differential, it could be a differentiating function. It could be it could be any other statistical functions. So anything, all such sorts actually defines the FD. It's nothing but that a relation between output and input. Similarly, FI has been defined as a, you can say, transfer function between the output and the input. Here the input is interfering input, the output is interfering output. That is, can refer maybe as OI capital I. It could be OD, the desired output. And then you have something called as modifying inputs. Actually, that is basically, it modifies the way actually the desired input responds to the desired output. So it modifies the relation between the desired input and the desired output, and the desired interfering input and the desired interfering output. So that's why it has a relation, a modifying relation to the transfer function of the two, and all those together actually sum up to the output. So the output actually is not pure, it's not the pure desired output, it contains some other components also. Now an example to demonstrate this fact is of a manometer, which is actually used to measure the pressure difference between two streams, or you can say pressure difference between two ends, or you can say pressure difference between maybe two chambers of gas or liquid or any fluid. So this is what we get if P1 is greater than P2. This is what we get as in height, and we basically discuss that P1 minus P2 actually is equal to rho gh, or we can say rho gx in this case. So this is very simple. So this is now for us an instrument used to measure the pressure, or we can also say differential pressure. So we can easily do this. This is an instrument, quite fine, no issues. But what happens is, so the input here is, the desired input is P1 and P2. That's what actually gives us rho gh, assuming rho and g constant. So the x gives us the solution. But what happens is, if such an instrument actually is placed on an accelerating surface or an accelerating body, So because of the acceleration of that body, even if P1 is equal to P2, in this case you can see P1 is P1 here, you could actually see something like this happening to this instrument. All right, so this is accelerating this way in this direction. So you can see a column already, there. So now in this case, even though the pressure is same, we still see something as an output. That is, x is not equal to 0. Though x should have been 0 because P1 minus P2 is equal to 0. So this is kind of an interfering input actually to this instrument, where it gives a value even if the pressure is same. So this type of instrument, this is the problem with the instruments or the type of inputs that we have. And let me rub this off. And similarly, we can have an interfering input in this form, where you can, if you tilt your manometer by an angle theta, because gravity acts in the vertical direction, so you can see that there is still some output even if P1 is equal to P2. So P1 is equal to P2 again. That means P1 minus P2 is equal to 0. So x should have been equal to 0, but you see there is a significant portion of x from here to here that is visible. So again, we know that P1 is equal to P2, but because of this type of arrangement, tilt angle, which is actually for us the modifying input, or you can say interfering input in this case, so it does give us an output which is not equal to 0. So such type of things are actually to be taken care of with the instruments, and that's actually the point of concern here, or the study here. Similarly, when you want to measure the strain in a specimen, in a test specimen, you put up a strain gauge, let's say in this form, a strain gauge in this form, and then you measure the resistance according to the forces applied and the stresses developed and the strain that is actually caused on this test specimen. There will be change in RC, and there will be change in this RG, and you can balance this Wheatstone bridge accordingly, and then you can get the value of the resistance, that the change that happens here, and you can get the value of the strain. But because of a nearby, let's say, the alternating current field that we have in our in our labs, or in our, let's say, in our residential places, or let's say most probably in our labs, we have 50 hertz here AC. So this field actually tries to basically interfere with the voltage levels of this whole circuit, thereby actually modifying the values. So if this type of disturbance is there, so even if the strain gauge has measured the right amount of strain in this specimen, but we won't basically get the correct answer because of this type of disturbance, because this disturbance actually changes the voltage levels that we are actually measuring this strain with. So such are basically the interfering inputs or the modifying inputs to the system. So the desired input actually is just the strain in this member. Now, how do we account for these interfering and modifying inputs? Because desired input is something that we really want the instrument to measure, but because of the modifying and interfering inputs, we need to think about the strategies, how basically we can actually correct them, so that we have the correct answer, or we have the correct measurement by the instrument. So we have these methods: method of inherent sensitivity, the method of calculated output corrections, method of high gain feedback, method of signal filtering, method of opposing inputs. Now, before I discuss the last three, let's discuss the first one, method of inherent sensitivity. So this is basically where you make the instruments actually insensitive to the modifying or the interfering input. So it could be like if your resistor is actually resistor is temperature dependent, that means the resistance actually changes with temperature of the surroundings. So you can always select a material which whose temperature coefficient, or the coefficient of thermal expansion, is actually quite low. So even if the temperature changes, it really doesn't matter in the change in the resistance of the specimen of the instrument. So that is something called a method of inherent sensitivity, where you design the components in such a way that they are actually insensitive to these types of disturbance, or these types of interfering and modifying inputs. Similarly, you can have method of calculate output corrections where you actually know these values. For example, in this manometer we have seen that because of the acceleration we have seen a column of liquid going up, so we can measure that column as per the acceleration, and accordingly we can always subtract that from the the output value. So if the output value is x is equal to 10, so we can say x is always equal to x minus 10, which means in the case of accelerated input also we can have x is equal to 0 because we're already subtracting the value minus 10. So that is by manual calculation, by manual observation, actually you can always measure such types of disturbances and actually subtract them from the output values. So that can also be done. But being more scientific, actually you have something called as high gain feedback, you have signal filtering, and you have opposing inputs. These are the more scientific methods in this case. In the case of high gain feedback, we can look at this system. For example, we have a motor and a motor that actually rotates a spring, or you can say that compresses a spring and causes a displacement of the spring. So in this case there is a voltage that is applied to a motor, and accordingly motor develops a torque, and the torque actually causes, maybe you can say, torsional spring to displace, and then we can basically have some displacement x naught. So it could be subjected to now the modifying input IM1, then spring itself could be subjected to some modifying inputs IM2, whereby actually it tries to modify this value, so we may not actually get the correct value. So but if we use something called as a feedback device, where we actually measure the displacement of the spring and actually try to see that it basically is equal to actually the it is actually proportional to the applied voltage, so which actually we desire. So then we can actually use a feedback device in terms of it could be something like a sensor, whereby we measure the output and actually feedback it to the convert it to the voltage, analogous voltage, and actually compare it with the desired input, and accordingly something called as a closed loop control we do, and then we make it actually reach to the same point as is actually desired by EI. So this type of feedback system actually enables us to achieve or to make even sometimes this output actually really independent of these basic components, and it actually will depend more on the feedback part. So this is kind of called as high gain feedback actually, whereby the output actually is completely almost dependent on the feedback that we actually employ to actually make it a closed loop system, which is more stable and which is more actually accurate than the open loop one. Here we don't have any measure of the output, so there is no corrections because of this interfering inputs. We may have changes in the displacement which actually we cannot measure because we don't have any feedback device. So any for a same voltage we may have different displacements in this case, because this interfering or modifying inputs may act sometimes or they may not act at different times. So accordingly change displacement will be different at different times for the same voltage, which is actually not correct for the instrument. So as a high gain feedback can always measure that displacement even if there is some spurious inputs, or you can say modifying or interfering inputs, and whatever change they cause actually in the output, that can always be measured, and then we can always compare that with the desired signal or the desired voltage, and accordingly we can take action so until it reaches to the value that is actually desired for the corresponding voltage. So this is one method. The other method is method of signal filtering, where we actually use filters. It could be mechanical filters, it could be electrical filters. We have different types of filters actually that we use. We can study them later on also. So in a way you can understand that, for example, you have a modifying input, sorry, or interfering input, a modifying input, and you do use some kind of an, you can say, mechanical or an electrical system whereby this doesn't give any output actually. This multiplies this almost with a zero, can say mathematically, so that the effect of this is almost gone. The effect of modifying is also gone, and then doesn't really have an impact on the actually desired the output. So the input goes here and then you receive an output which is purely proportional to the desired input, because the impact of the interfering and modifying inputs are actually filtered out. This can be more clearly understood by an example. In this case, you can just look at the vibration isolation mount. So you have a vibration sensitive instrument at the top. So this is the instrument, and this is the structure which is actually vibrating, which we call sometimes as undesired vibrations are there on the structure, and we are trying to measure some quantity with this instrument. But because of these vibrations, continuous vibrations, they actually change the value of the output. So these are, let's say, these vibrations act as our modifying, or you can say interfering inputs, and we want to actually avoid these things. So as we have seen just now, the filtering method, so we can use these isolation mounts, vibration isolation mounts. This consists of some springs, okay, and it could be sometimes like some dampers, it could be like vibration isolation pads, which are actually kind of a dampers, or let's say very soft kind of materials actually that damp out these vibrations, and they don't allow these vibrations to be transferred to the instrument. So even if the structure or the base is actually vibrating, so those vibrations are least transferred to the instrument, so our instrument actually is able to measure the things correctly. This is actually what is meant by this one. So at the input level only, you are trying to zero it out with some components which could be mechanical or electrical, and which try to actually zero out the effects of those spurious inputs on the instrument, and then we have a pure output which corresponds to the input, desired input. So now this filtering could be at the initial input stage, where you actually directly filter out the inputs which are the modifying and the interfering inputs, or it could be also present at the output, where you allow these inputs, the modifying and the interfering inputs, to go into the whole instrument. But at the end, because the output here, this one actually is composed of the both the desired output plus the modifying output plus the interfering output, all these effect of all these three is present here. So you can always analyze an output for such things, and then design these filtering mechanisms so that the output can itself be filtered, so the desired only is allowed to pass through this. So you have a filter that blocks the output due to the interfering inputs, and the output due to modifying inputs, it blocks it out, it doesn't allow it to go out. So there is almost nothing out of these due to these outputs, only the desired output is filtered, and that is what is actually desired. So this is putting output filtering, and this is more of input filtering. It filters at the input, filters at the output. So one of the examples is this instrument, and another example could be a gimbal suspension for a manometer. So as we have seen, when the manometer actually accelerated, we had issues, but even the in this case we can just see more of as an gimbal joints put up here, which allow the rotation along this axis. So even if the base actually is tilted, as we have seen based on that tilt angle, so we had changes in the level, even if the pressure was same. But in this case, if the base tilts, for example theta 2, the base tilts by theta 2, so this axis, or you can say phi 1 or phi 2 and phi 1. So if base tilts by theta 2, so this phi 2 actually, because it's a freely moving gimbal, or you can say some revolute joint, it doesn't allow it to rotate along with the structure. Rather, it actually rotates back to that amount of angle, the angle theta 2 has actually taken. So it makes it stay vertical always. Similarly, if theta 1 changes, phi 1 actually is the negative of theta 1, so that this manometer always is placed in the vertical direction, so that the effect of gravity is always there. So this is again putting a gimbal mechanism actually would be kind of a filter here, and putting a vibration isolation mount again is a filter here. So in this case, this is filtering the inputs itself. You can say again, in this case it may be filtering the inputs itself. All right, so this is more of mechanical ways how we basically can filter the input interfering inputs and the modifying inputs, so that they don't have an impact on the output. Similarly, you have a thermocouple, an example of a thermocouple where you have a reference junction that can be that can actually vary based on the ambient temperature, which can vary considerably. So we use a thermal insulation so that it doesn't really have an impact on the reference junction. So varying ambient temperature doesn't actually put an impact on the reference junction. So it's kind of again blocking or filtering. So putting up a filter here, this thermal insulation becomes the filter. So even if the varying ambient temperature changes, it doesn't have any impact on the junction. So whatever is actually to be measured will be measured appropriately and correctly. Similarly, you can put a magnetic shield for a strain gauge, the strain measuring instrument. So if you put a magnetic field, the 60 hertz AC field or the 50 hertz AC field would actually not have any impact on the change in the voltages here. So obviously we will have proper measurement. So this is again we can call as filtering done here, or you can just see this one. So if this is this is almost kind of an output filtering where you allow this this AC field to actually interfere to in this, which is actually not normally what happens actually, but because you know that it will be an output like this, strain plus interference, so it can be something like up down, but the trend will be something like this. So this is the input, I can say the EI versus time plot, but you can always put up an RC filter in the circuit itself actually, if you want, if you can measure the frequency of this, and you know the frequency with which actually the strain changes at maximum. So you can keep, which in some cases we see that it's not more than 2 hertz. Let's say the frequency actually changes so quickly. So we can have something called as low pass filter or high pass filter that we use in electrical and electronic engineering. So these filters can be employed. This is more of a passive filter, where we have RC filter. You must have studied this earlier also. So employing this RC filter actually will convert, or will have an output something like this. So this is without the RC filter, and this is with RC filter employed. In the circuit itself you have the pure strain. So this is again more of an output filtering, where you put filter at the output. So you know that this output actually contains both modifying and, let's say, interfering outputs, but because you can use a filter at the output, so you can get the pure value of the strain. All right. So now another method, the last method, is the method of opposing inputs. So it's more similar to method of corrections, input corrections, where you actually try to measure the corrections that need to be put in, and then you adjust them accordingly. But this method of opposing our input is actually more scientific, and you can design systems so that they can automatically adjust, rather than manually actually measuring and then correcting. You can have some automatic adjustments, whereby you can create systems in such a way that they can automatically take care of the modifying and the interfering inputs. So this is how it's done. This is the block diagram. So you know that there are some unavoidable interfering inputs, which is referred to as capital I1, and then you have something called as intentionally introduced interfering inputs. So this is almost this is the block diagram, but this is, you can always design some systems like this, and then corresponding transfer functions. You can always have modifying input. For modifying inputs also you can have some more blocks similar to this. So this creates some output, this creates some output, but we use a summing junction here. We have a plus sign and a minus sign because we want to subtract this from this. So then essentially this should be 0, so that it doesn't have any impact on the actual output. So the actual output will only be a function of the desired input and the relating, you can say, transfer function between the two. So what we have done is we have understood the nature of the unavoidable interfering input, and then we have created a system which actually takes care of the creates a similar kind of a input, but in a reverse fashion, so that actually the null effect is essentially 0. So an example could be of a multimeter, where actually you are trying to measure the voltage, or you can say the current level, the voltage or the current levels with a multimeter. So essentially a multimeter looks like this. You have a north pole, south pole, and you have a coil in between. So then you use the voltage between the two actually is according to the voltage. You have a pointer that actually moves and tells you how much actually the voltage is. But what happens is, because of the modifying, or you can say interfering inputs, whereby because of temperature change, this coil resistance of the coil actually may change with temperature, because resistance is actually a function of the temperature also. Something like this. Sometimes some relations actually relate. This is the thermal coefficient. So resistance actually can change with temperature. So if such is the case, then your output may not be correct, it may actually change. So because of those interfering and modifying inputs, you may have a different output for the same input. So this is what actually is the problem. So what we can always do is, so we know that the resistance of coil changes with temperature like this. For example, it changes linearly. So if we are aware about the properties of the material, the coil for which we have used, so we know that how the resistance changes with temperature for that material. So we can always create and use another material for which the resistance actually varies something like this, r is equal to r naught, something like 1 minus alpha t or something like that. So that we know that there are some materials whose resistance actually decreases with increase in temperature. So we can use such materials and you add that as a resistor here, that is R comp, which is R compensation resistance, because of which what happens is we get a constant resistance. So we have a proper, we have taken a proper actually, we have taken a proper opposing input to this, so that we get the constant resistance even with the change in the temperature. So we get the correct output for the same input. So we'll always get the same output for the same input. Fine. So this is more engineering, or you can say more ingenious, because what we have done is we have understood the nature of this change, and we have created a system of similar to that, so that at any different temperature changes, it will automatically adjust and actually cancel out those effects and give us the proper results. So this is how the block diagram looks like. So you have an ambient temperature actually that can change the resistance of the coil on the coil, that is the effect on or coil, that resistance on the coil, and similarly the effect of resistors of the compensating coil. So all these are plus and minus together, they are essentially 0, and then we have the desired input, the output as per the desired input. So this is more of method of opposing inputs. So you are opposing the input, that the input is the coil here, and change in that coil actually you're trying to oppose with a more systematic manner, rather than actually measuring and then putting up some resistances. Similarly, in the last example, I'll just maybe try to explain here. It's more mechanical in nature. So you're trying to measure the mass flow rate of this fluid with an orifice meter. We'll discuss these orifice meters later on in detail. So you're trying to measure the mass flow rate of this orifice meter through this mass flow rate of the fluid with this orifice meter, whereby this is actually done by putting up a manometer at two ends or two sides of the orifice meter. So this is the orifice meter here, and this is the gap that it allows the fluid to flow through. This is the manometer. So what happens is this is high pressure, and the moment it goes through this, the velocity the velocity increases because it's narrow gap, and then the static pressure decreases. So that's why you have less pressure here, high pressure here. So the change in this actually, or the level of this actually, determines the velocity of this fluid. So if you know the mass flow rate is actually equal to rho into A into V. So if the, let's say, density of this fluid is constant, if the A is constant, you can always find V, because this is proportional to difference in the pressure P1 minus P2, which is this height X. All right. So what happens is because we know that this fluid actually, the fluid, or it could be a gas, it could be a liquid. For example, in case of gases, so we know that rho actually changes with temperature, and also rho changes with pressure. So if you have high pressure, you can have density also high, and if you have low temperature, density also increases. So with changes in ambient temperature, with changes in the pressure of the gas itself, so you have changes in the density. So if density changes significantly, then your m dot actually also changes. So density changes, m dot also changes. So for the same let's say pressure difference, you will not have the same mass flow rate. Right. So you have to somehow compensate for this. So what we do is we try to use this type of arrangement where there's a metering pin. This pin tries to increase and decrease the area of cross section of this orifice meter. So the moment it goes near to this, so because of this hindrance, the total area decreases, and the moment it goes back, the total area of flow actually through the orifice actually increases. So actually we are trying to control the area of this orifice meter. So because of the change control on the area of the orifice meter, actually we can compensate for the density. So there are some gas filled bellows, and then there is a screwed shaft with which this metering pin is connected. So the moment temperature decreases of this gas, we have increase in the density, and as the density increases, this gas filled bellows actually somehow contract, and then they push this metering pin towards, on the left side, which actually decreases the area. So if the density increases, if we decrease area correspondingly, and almost, let's say, we get the same value. Similarly, if the pressure increases, density again increases, and we can always decrease the area by pushing the metering pin again to the left side. So we can always devise and then analyze the system more properly in a more scientific way by using equations, corresponding equations to this, and design the metering pin accordingly, so then we can actually take care of this variation with the ambient temperature and pressure actually by such arrangement. So this is, we know what is the impact of the temperature on the density, we know what is the impact of the pressure on the density, and if we know all these things, we can accordingly make use of this type of arrangement to actually change the area correspondingly, so that m dot remains constant for a given pressure change. So this is the block diagram for this, similar to the one we have seen previously. So we have gas pressure as modifying input, gas temperature as the modifying input, and these effects are changed by a effect of area change and the effect of area change again, so that the manometer reading is as per the desired input. Alright, so this completes our input output characteristics of these instruments. We'll now look at the performance characteristics of instruments, which includes static and dynamic characteristics, that we'll see in the next lecture. Thank you.